Hey, good to see everyone here. Welcome to today's panel, The Bittersweet Symphony, Changing Your Company's Growth Mode. We're going to talk about how to grow, but before we do that, we have three exciting panelists here. I'm going to start with the first question to you, Sally. You're the managing partner of Ace & Company. You are a venture capital group with more than $1.7 billion assets under management. This is an insane number. I don't even know how many zeros you have in there. And you have invested in companies like Airbnb, Uber, or Anybotics here to have the Swiss connection. So how does a day in your life look like?
Yeah, good to be here. Great to see everybody. Thanks, Maruscha, for putting us together. So Ace & Company, we do all of our venture capital investments through our VC arm, which is called Ace Ventures. And there are two core activities that's really most important in our sort of daily life. One is actually sourcing deals, finding that outlier founder who is solving a real big problem, understanding the grit behind their vision, what really makes them tick. And the second part is then getting to know them. And actually, we spend a lot of time with them, understanding their strategy. And then the second half of the activity is then after we invest, we do make very concerted effort to be very engaged with our founders to help them through this sort of chaotic journey of entrepreneurship, which is really not for the faint-hearted, and to help them solve maybe what you can say is simple problems, but could really be very pivotal to the future of their business. So really finding entrepreneurs and then working with them and keeping them on that journey through the vision. Yeah.
I'm sure your day also only has 24 hours, but
yes,
there
are other activities I have to participate in, but for this venture capital, this is the key. Yeah.
Our second panelist is Max. You are the founder and CEO of Decentriq. It's also called the Switzerland of data, and you provide data clean rooms. That sounds very mystical. What is a data clean room?
Yeah, happy to tell you more about this, and thank you very much, Maruscha, for the invitation. It's basically bringing the century-old concept of Switzerland to the data economy, like a neutral ground for where companies can jointly work on data, which is, of course, very important if you need access to data in the age of AI and of any kind of models that you want to train and infer. And we provide the secure, trusted entity in between, basically, but from a tech perspective.
Amazing. And last but not least, Maruscha is also here. Thank you for setting all of this up. You are responsible for relations with investors and also the AI strategy within Microsoft here in Switzerland. And you have been in the ecosystem for quite a while now, and I'm sure there have been a lot of changes over the past few years. What changes have you seen in the Swiss ecosystem?
Thank you. So also, thank you for being here. Welcome, everybody, and also thank you for being here. I've been now with Microsoft for startups, setting it up since the beginning for 5.5 years, and the startup ecosystem is much older, right? But what I've seen over like these 5.5 years is really that the support has gotten a lot stronger. So there are more and more associations or also companies that help startups grow. Then on the other hand, you have this boom of technology that makes it easier to start your company, but then the access to capital has gotten a little bit more difficult, or it's still there, but it's just you need to really have something valuable, and investors don't just fund something that is nice to have, right? And what I've seen as well with the rise of technology is that globally, there's a lot more focus on Switzerland because of our universities, because of the great tech that we actually bring out into the world.
And now it's also time to capitalize on that great tech that we have to build actual successful companies. Yeah. And Max, that's exactly what I want to focus on with the first question. We want to talk about how to get from the do-it-yourself, scrappy startup in the early days to building an actual company around something that is working. And the first question for you is, how do you actually know? How does it feel when things are actually taking off? How do you know that you're on the right path and now it's really time to double down and to build an actual company around it?
Well, it's a very good question because we are in the very, our customers are very large enterprises. So it's like getting a signal from the market is very, very much delayed. It's not like a consumer product, where you can test multiple colors or features very easily. But for us, it's that some of the biggest companies in the world now work in multiple countries with us. They want to expand. More companies want to join the network that we are creating. We were also fortunate to have received quite some money from investors, mainly from the US, around $20 million. And of course, this gave us the opportunity to build. And then it's also good to have global partners that can also support our infrastructure, like Microsoft, but also consultancy companies.
And with that change of gear, Maruscha, it's also usually a change for you as a founder. How did you see the founders' roles change with that gear shift?
I've seen a lot of founders actually, because it's very individual, right? When that growth mode changes, it can be like if you're the industry where you're at, if you're B2C, B2B, right? So it's super individual, but I think a trade is, or also the founders I've talked to, is that they really had to look themselves really hard in the mirror and have that self-reflection and be open to external feedback. Because maybe you're a founder that brings that startups to like the first 10 million or the first 10 people. But then there comes a time where maybe there's somebody else that can take over for you. And you can go into another leadership role, but maybe no longer as the CEO. So I think being super honest to yourself is the most important part.
Not always easy, though. That's the difficult part.
Yeah.
With that change, Sally, and the investments you've made, we just mentioned Airbnb, Uber, for example, these mega successful companies, how does the organization change when you start to enter this growth mode? Because suddenly you need not only more people, but probably also different functions. What did you
So
observe?
maybe let's define, right? So if you think of, let's do a contrast, look at hyperscale. When your customer base is doubling every few months, when your active users is compounding at 2 to 3% every day, you are basically no longer able as a CEO to focus on, let's say, the product, where you're working on everything, and you started realizing you had 10 employees, 30 employees, and suddenly you're hiring a lot of employees. You start thinking, how do you translate the value of the company through all these people really quickly? And what the company goes through is sort of a constant rapid transition, and people are constantly exposed to new roles and new challenges. You still have a lot of customers maybe calling you and complaining about their product, but on the other hand, you have a lot of traction with very large-scale customers. So how do you balance fixing the small problems versus growth? And you kind of need to balance between growth, then you have to have product, technology, and finance. If you focus completely on growth, and your technology and finance are lagging behind, you can go straight into bankruptcy very quickly. So while it feels like the whole firm, the whole company is running as fast as they can just to stay at the same spot, but at the same time, the potential for things to break down is very high. And so this is where it is very exciting, but it is also extremely tiring. And for the management team, the founders, to be able to transition through different stages of growth and to realize this is the time where I now need really specialized leadership, and how do I basically attract that density of talent that I can really rely on to take the company forward, because it is now a lot bigger than your own influence. Yeah.
And I imagine in that sense, this also changes so often, probably within the 6 to 18 months time frame.
Indeed,
you completely build sort of a new company almost.
Yes, and when I was in Silicon Valley, I saw a lot of these examples, and actually also in Switzerland. And it's very important to think about the kind of support system you have for yourself, your leaders, and the people below them, and to really kind of give them this empowerment, and to know what kind of decisions you cannot wait on, but yet the decision may not hurt the business down the road. It's not a defining decision. So there's a lot of these understanding that you have to do going from speed to growth. Yeah.
There's
it's a delicate balance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but this is it's not for the faint-hearted, right? Entrepreneurship, but this is where the reward, I mean, Max, you can speak to it, but the drive has to be there to keep you really passionate about the problem you're solving every day.
And Max, in that sense, one of the first things you probably do is then also think, okay, you started with founders or co-founders, and then at one point you need a more professional management team to come into place. How did you think about that?
Well, I think management in our phase, or I think overall in the whole tech industry, was a little bit a word one has to be a bit careful because you want doers and executors and not just like managers.
Yeah.
I mean, you also saw this in very big technology companies that management layers were, let's say, structured in a more efficient way. And also for us, at the end, if you, can't work with the product, can't sell, it's really, really difficult to justify your position. Also, I do sales and so on, and if you detach yourself from the market, I don't think it's healthy. And at the end, it's also the most fun.
It's really this balance, this sort of love-hate
It's more fun than going
relationship.
through finances and budget, for
I'm
sure.
sorry?
It's more fun than going through finances and budget.
Well, if the finances are successful, then they are fun.
Then it's fun.
But then the pressure starts in the
Yeah.
next board meeting. So.
And continue on that trajectory, like you're growing, you are really also adding headcount to your company. How do you also pay attention to not kill the culture that you built in the early days? Because that's a huge challenge that many people face.
I mean, it's indeed a challenge because, I mean, we describe Decentriq as a COVID baby. It's a very remote company, and with all the pros and cons, on the cultural side, we meet twice per year all together in different places in Europe. But a lot of it is, unfortunately virtual. I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges, to be honest, especially for new joiners. If it's just like, can you see my screen? It's not the same, right? But
fair enough. Maruscha, I'm just curious, you work with many different startups, and what we just heard here is this culture part with, a lot of is still happening remote or virtual. Do you see a tendency of people going back to the offices to really focus on this culture part, or not really, and we still continue doing most of the business online?
I think you have to do a little bit of both, right? Because for some people, they're much more efficient if they can stay at home or work from home, or if you're a hardcore engineer, you just want to get your things done, coding, maybe in your basement, maybe in your living room. But then also me, I go to the office like 2-3 times a week, just to also see some colleagues that maybe over Teams I wouldn't ping and get different perspectives. But then you have these, like we've all seen on the news, like some big tech companies order like 5 days a week back to work. And that can really also kill a culture, I think. So you kind of like have to adapt and see what your people want. And I would say just ask them.
Sounds simple, yeah. Let's continue the growth trajectory, Sally. At one point, it's also time to think about our board. And we probably also want to not only professionalize in our leadership team, but also on the board level. What makes a good board as we start to really get more professional and grow the company?
Yeah, so you really want to think of your board not as just an oversight body, but like really an extension of your own team. And I think this is the best way to curate a really good relationship. And if you're foreseeing that your company is going to enter into a different growth stage, a different market, it's really best to have some of very key operators, experienced operators who have made the mistakes already, who could basically help you understand how to make decisions and save you a lot of time, money. At the same time, they have this experience of balancing how to be spending money and growing, and at the same time, oversight, right? And to empower you to do the same thing, to build a governance structure with you that gives you the ability to move fast, but yet not be non-compliant. Yep. And I talk about compliance because this in today's day and age, when capital is hard to come, the days of cheap money is over. Investors, customers are ever more selective. They may like your brand, but they will not tolerate a non-compliant type of experience with you. Yep. So this is extremely important to balance, but you still have to focus on the growth trajectory. So having that board that gives you the ability to see the short term, the long term, globally, and be a key operator next to you, that would be important for growth.
And what role do the investors play in the board?
The investors play kind of more like a sparring partner and an oversight partner. They can also be sparring with you on your vision. Very oftentimes, if you as a founder have a very strong vision about the fact that your company should be global, and there may be some board members who think maybe that's far too risky, then you have to think, is it the right board member, right? It could be the other way around, that they are expecting you to be more adventurous, and so that value alignment is quite important. And when you have raised a really big round, 50 million, let's say, it's scary for the first time. Yeah. And so you should feel the pressure of that, but you shouldn't be too afraid because the person, the board member that gave you that capital should be there to help you be the steward of that capital as well. So that's how you should think of that relationship.
You're playing on the same team, ultimately.
Yes, in the end, yeah.
And Max, there's this balance. There are many different balances that you as a founder have to strike for. And when you grow, it's one time like, I want to grow, we want to get more revenue, we want to grow in terms of headcount. But at the same time, you also have to make sure that you actually deliver the product, the service, that your operations are of good quality. And that doesn't always seem like an easy balance. How do you go about that to make sure that you balance them in a good way?
Well, you know, I mainly work with PowerPoint, so then this starts after when my job is finished. I mean, I think it's especially on like client deliveries and rollouts. You know, it makes the team proud, but I think it's also important that they're a bit, or we are all a bit scared. You know, because obviously we work with extremely sensitive data, so we clearly don't want to fuck it up. And what we learned, what big clients really appreciate is, you know, as you mentioned on the board level, to work in the same team, to be super responsive. If things don't work immediately, let them know. I mean, also, you know, the big companies always deliver everything perfectly, except Microsoft, of course. And also enjoy it. I think, you know, when I write a monthly update to the whole team, and when I walk through the city and I see the logos of clients, or we also work with hospitals and so on. I just visited one last week, and you see, I don't know, a few thousand rooms with patients in there, and you think this runs via your platform, right? I think this is really, really motivating.
I love that. Enjoy the journey part. That's
really
important.
Yeah, it's true, right? I mean, actually, we even have this written when we founded the company in our values, that the outcome depends on external factors as well. You can be super lucky, you can be unlucky, but the time we spend together is 100% under our control.
I love that. Sally, back to you. When we talk about growth, suddenly we also have the option of opening and expanding to new markets. When should we start thinking about that? When is that a good idea for us?
So the conventional wisdom is that once you find product market fit in one market, you basically want to try and get as much market share as possible. But if you're starting your business in Switzerland, you can often find that the Swiss market can be quite a small market. And Switzerland being a global brand, there are many countries, many companies love to work with. So you could find yourself with opportunities to actually work globally. So it really depends on where you're starting your business and what the opportunity presents. And if you're going to be scaling a large product, a large market opportunity, there really shouldn't be anything stopping you, but just be mindful that there is high risk when you venture into a new market. You do need to think about how you're going to fund the growth. You might need to raise a round before you fund the growth. You need to think very carefully about, is there already an existing competitor? Or should you be doing a counter market that they are not yet there? Right? So, and would the values of your product and your product service delivery fit the values of the local customer? So I think all that depends on whether you're ready for it, and is your product ready to scale? Have you fixed all the issues and is ready for the big ticket? So I think there's no fixed way, but surely Switzerland is a place where you go international. You can start thinking internationally very quickly.
Sooner or later you have to.
Yeah.
And in that sense, Maruscha, then you also probably have vast different options available for your distribution channels. How do they change as you start growing as a company?
I think when you start, you're your own distribution channel, right? The founders are your distribution channels. The friends that you have, the first POCs with customers and all of that. And then when you go in different markets, obviously it depends if you do hardware, if you do software, right? But I think it's always extremely important that you build a network around your startup that actually becomes part of a little bit your IP that can't be stolen from the competitors, right? So if you have like a digital solution, really see, okay, what partners, digital partners could I work with that could actually help me market my product to their existing customers? Maybe I need to give a little bit of a margin, yes. But that also helps to really put you in the market and work with different people. You are directly in an existing ecosystem. So I would really picture that in as well when you are looking for a new market, right? Might that be a new industry or a new country, that you really see, okay, where do I have partners that I can work with and make that part of the equation?
Absolutely. And Max, also from an operational perspective, probably everyone who started a company knows that in the beginning you do everything to get the client. You even customize the software if it has to be. But at one point you have probably to learn how to say no a bit more often. Did you also go through a learning curve like that where you said, hey, in the early days we just made it work no matter what to build traction? And then as we grew the company, there was a certain point where you just had to be more strict and say no more often to not completely end up with 1,000 different product configurations.
I mean, I think there are two developments. On the one hand side, you get more focused, and also your value proposition gets more focused. Therefore, there is less noise, basically. At the same time, some of our clients, we are a product company. We deliver a product, and anything around is developed by system integrators or big global consultancy companies. And then they stuff their consultants on it, and they do development, and we interact with them, but they do their stuff. And that's, of course, very good for us because, first of all, we get a deeper client relationship, but also you spoke about network. We build up a network with a company with already, 10,000 clients, and then you have a reference customer. And that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And Sally, you mentioned before the importance of compliance. The stakes are getting higher as we grow the company. There's more money at stake from investors and revenue from the customers. So compliance also becomes more important. How does that show, and how do you as a founder keep up with that need?
I think if you're going for, if you're intending to go for a large brand to basically sustain in the game, compliance, governance structures have to be part of at the back of your mind. You want to create an incentive for employees to basically be compliant, but also be agile. And I just can't see, if you think of most of the failures in company building, a lot of it comes from operational failures, non-compliant failures, poor understanding of liability sometimes, and where are the problems in your product. So I think this just can't be an afterthought. I'll just leave it at that.
It's even a necessity that you can actually grow to certain customer segments that you are compliant, basically.
Yes, and I think, and I do think that if you're a Swiss founder building a company from Switzerland, I think you can't be a non-compliant brand, right? But I do think that it adds a lot of value. I think you have to see that as a value-adding proposition.
Yeah, not the other way around.
Yes,
I like that. And compliance doesn't start or end with technology, but technology can also be an important factor. So I just wonder, Maruscha, what technological decisions do you have to take early on so they don't come back later when you're trying to scale and bite you in your ass?
So I think here, I know tonight I say a lot, it depends, but it really does. But the first step is understand your end customer. And then choose to do the things that keep you alive longer. I just talked to a colleague before, and we had this conversation about that. So when you go into a regulated market, really do security, use authentication methods that are built by big brands, because you can never be as good as them. It's just that. Care about your data residency. Think about compliance, right? That will never go away. So the earlier you have that and understand it, and also understand it's a different language, the better. And then if you're not in a regulated industry, you can really just build easy, build simple, build for scale, and then fail fast, right? So don't try to over-engineer from the beginning, but really kind of take some automated things and just build it, get it out there, get it in front of customers, and then iterate along the way, and then scale horizontally.
Oh, amazing. Max, to finance all of that, you also need to think about the right strategy for your company. You can either focus on profitability, the momentum has shifted a bit more in that favor, or you can go to investors and raise money to grow and to also really make it big. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to growth? What is the right strategy for your own company at Decentriq?
I mean, for us, because we first had to build the platform or the first version of it. We started with venture capital from day zero, basically. We're very fortunate to have found people and institutions who shared the vision to that, and then later on leveled up on that front. But in the meanwhile, the platform is live, and of course, you know, when you speak to investors, you need the PowerPoint slides, but then you also need to deliver. So the logos you promised need to move in the funnel to closed at some stage. And yeah, I think it depends what you're building. For us, you know, in the deep tech space, you need money at the very beginning just to pull things off, to hire the people. And especially for us being, you know, in the data security privacy space, we can't move fast and break things, right? I mean, we're happy to move fast, but we just can't break things because it would be the end of our business.
Absolutely. Sally, there's one very important last part I want to talk about when it comes to fundraising, and that is the matching of your growth plan with the type of capital that you're going for. Because that can be a mismatch, and that could eventually even harm your company big time. Yeah. Why is this so important, and what are the options there that I have?
Yeah, so I think in the very, very early days, it's very common to go for your angel investors, friends and family. But as Max said, if you're going for a deep tech and you really need a lot of capital, and you need to be, you would be in loss making for a long time, then you need to think about what kind of investors can really give you a large amount of capital and will sustain the risk, right? So venture capital is a great fit for that kind of thing because they understand the risk taking, they have a long horizon, they understand the scale up phase, and they are very involved as an investor group. And when you're going into a later stage, when your business is more mature and you're thinking about an exit, maybe an IPO, you could be thinking about kind of maybe private equity type investors who are more interested in much more mature businesses. They are looking for a smaller return, and they have a shorter horizon. So they're expecting maybe getting the money back in like 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And so the ability to understand your growth cycle or your own desire to be growing that fast or slow is actually quite inherent in the kind of investors you target and talk to. So if you're very clear that you're very willing to work really hard and grow into the valuation, like what Max is doing right now, and venture capital is a great partner. But if you want to pace yourself and you've got a more mature product, maybe a lot of infrastructure type things, sometimes private equity group can be helpful. And I also say corporate venture capital because that's a really important source of financing as well. And sometimes they can help you open doors into corporations. So that's another thing to think about.
So I think the message here is really be mindful about where you go because you have different options. You have to be strategic about it.
And also understand what the other party brings to the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time. I just want to ask you a quick rapid fire questions. Max, let's start with you. What is the biggest mistake in your entrepreneurial journey?
So many.
That's it. So many.
So many.
Sally,
and there will be many more.
So. Okay, there will be more. Fair. Sally, what's one red flag that you see in a potential investment case?
Misrepresentation from the founding team. That is absolutely a no-go. I mean, goes right through to ethics and values. Yeah, so that's a red flag.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And Maruscha, what's the most valuable lesson that scale-ups can teach corporates in that sense? What can corporates learn from startups and scale-ups?
Stay curious and just have fun. That's what I learned from the startups that I talked to.
Absolutely. And the last one for all of you, profitability or growth? Let's start with Sally.
Growth.
Both.
Profitable growth.
Sustainable growth.
I mean, even Microsoft, is under pressure to, deliver both. So.
Same. Sorry.
Perfect. Maruscha, Max, Sally, thank you so much for being here today.
Sivan.
And enjoy the rest of the night. Thank you.
You.
Big applause for them.
Thank you.